Picture an obsidian mirror, polished until it held the night. Priests set it on a stand, watched Venus rise, then scheduled taxes, weddings, and wars. Simple cause and effect. No mystery required. If a tool like that guided daily life, what could it do for ours? Forecast power spikes before heat waves. Time harvests to safer windows. Avoid risky product launches on shock days. Families could choose travel weeks that feel calmer. Builders could pour concrete when winds settle. Traders could skip volatility traps. If the method returns, we do not copy rituals. We copy results. A clear reading, a clean decision, fewer surprises. If the mirror's rules still track the sky, and the sky still turns, do we finally use them in our favor? When the Maya stood at their height, they built with a sense of purpose, shaped not only by stone, but by time. From mountains to coastal plains, their cities rose in careful lines. Plazas framed by pyramids, temples, and carved stairways all arranged with the sky in mind. They planted according to rhythms, traded by signs, and even made peace or war by signals seen not in the land, but above it. In this world, timing mattered as much as strength, and at the center of that timing stood a tool both fragile and powerful, a polished mirror of obsidian. Its surface reflected not only starlight, but entire systems of belief, planning, and control. Found deep beneath temple floors or hidden in sealed rooms, these mirrors were not symbols. They were instruments, finely made to track the path of Venus and other celestial markers. One fragment, pulled from the earth near a temple stair, still bore the sharp polish needed to read those patterns. It may have once rested on a stone base aligned with the east, catching the glow of dawn on certain days. This alignment was no accident. Each structure in the heart of a Maya city, from the observatory towers to the market gates, followed a logic based on cycles. Could such cycles have decided when food was stored, when roads opened, or when rulers claimed power? The Maya kept dual calendars, one sacred and one seasonal, and the mirror helped them reconcile both. It added precision to myth and gave structure to daily life. In times of plenty, it protected order. In times of drought or conflict, it offered a tool to reduce chance. Their roads, called sakbeob, cut clean lines through jungle and stone, guiding trade to inland towns and ports. Could the dates chosen for caravans have come from mirrored rooms, quiet places where priests waited for sky signs before giving the signal to move? Across this vast and layered world, the mirror was less a mystery and more a manager, a way to bring predictability to seasons that changed fast and lands that demanded care. Trade grew, crops rose, and cities thrived not through fortune, but through systems built around timing. What if that timing was the real secret of their success? What if a civilization, long misunderstood for myth, had, instead, mastered something more enduring than gold? The rhythm of decision itself. And could that rhythm still hold value today? If read again. Have you ever wondered how a single piece of obsidian could guide entire cities, farms, and markets? Hit like and subscribe for more to uncover how the Maya turned mirrors into powerful tools, shaping timing, trade, and daily life. Your curiosity will follow the hidden paths from the first reflection to the full rhythm of civilization. Discover secrets that turn light into life. Inside a roofed chamber, tucked behind a stone platform, a low stand sat at the center of soot-streaked tiles. The surface bore shallow rings, each one carefully carved to cradle a rounded base. These were not altars or thrones. They were stations, built for tools, not for worship. Close inspection revealed black scorch marks and thin layers of white lime, proof of repeated heating and cooling. The pattern matched what was needed to shape or stabilize polished obsidian, a fragile process requiring both flame and control. Ash residue had gathered in a small channel near the base, perhaps from a narrow oil lamp or wick kept steady against drafts. Across from the stand, a square window had been carved into the wall with smooth edges and an eastward tilt. The slot was too narrow for decoration and too precisely angled to be accidental. When the morning sun rose, it cut a beam across the room and hit the center of the stand. On specific days, that light would have aligned with the path of Venus, and the mirror placed on the base would have caught both the dawn and the star. This was not a grand observatory meant to impress the public. It was a small room, quiet and exact, built for steady hands and focused eyes. Could a priest here have sat for hours before light appeared, waiting for a signal known only to the trained? The walls carried faint soot outlines where a shield or panel once hung, likely to control light or limit wind. The air held a trace of old oils and dry earth, and the floor bore signs of repeated kneeling shallow depressions worn smooth by time. These clues, taken together, showed a functional workspace, a lab, not a shrine. And within this workspace, timing was made visible. The mirror, when set in place, reflected not only stars but decisions. A priest might have used this setup to choose the right day to open a trade road, or to pause travel until signs were favorable. The device was small, but the influence it enabled could spread across towns and regions. If this simple stand helped regulate planting cycles or advise councils, then its design became more than clever. It became central. Could something so quiet, so easy to overlook, have shaped the choices of rulers, merchants, and farmers for centuries? The Maya placed great value on reading the sky, but here, they did more than look. They built tools, stations, and rooms that turned sky knowledge into structured life. And this stand, darkened by time but rich in purpose, may have been one of the most trusted instruments in that system. At the center of Chichen Itza stood a rounded stone tower. The Spanish would later call El Caracol, the snail, for its spiral staircase curling up within. But the Maya had built it not for beauty, nor for defense, but for vision. Cut into the thick outer walls were narrow slits, set not at random, but at fixed angles, each one opening to a precise part of the sky. Early surveys revealed that several of these slits aligned exactly with Venus rise points, especially during major cycles, when the star reappeared after long absences. These alignments were not decorative. They were technical, intentional, and used with care. On certain days, light from Venus or the rising sun would pass through one of these slits and travel deep into the chamber, landing on a carved platform or basin positioned at eye level. There, a polished disc of obsidian was likely placed, a mirror not meant for reflection of faces, but of stars and time. Could such a setup have served as a reliable guide for decisions that shaped the Maya calendar and society? The architecture suggested so. Beneath the viewing platforms ran narrow corridors leading to nearby buildings, a council chamber, a storage vault, and direct paths to the central plaza. From this tower, information could be dispatched quickly. If a light appeared when expected, it triggered action. The mirror became a regulator. Taxes were collected, markets opened, crops planted, and alliances sealed on days chosen by what appeared in the mirror's glass. Venus, sacred to the Maya, was both deity and clock. Some alignments in the tower also marked solar events like solstices and equinoxes, showing that this building wasn't tied to a single cycle, but acted as a central hub for all major celestial timing. Could the priests who worked within have functioned less like spiritual figures and more like astronomers and planners? If El Caracol was indeed a kind of celestial office, then its readings held great power. Wars may have been delayed until the light returned. Marriages between royal houses might have waited for a specific angle of dawn. These choices brought a sense of order, a belief that actions tied to the stars would find harmony on the ground. And the mirror, if it truly sat at the heart of that tower, transformed sky into signal. With each appearance of Venus, decisions were made that shaped not just cities, but an entire civilization's rhythm. This was not myth, but method. The Maya lived by 2 clocks. One was the sacred count of 260 days, known as the Tzolkin, used for rituals, name-giving, and the cycles of gods. The other was the Hab, a solar calendar of 365 days that followed the seasons, the rains, and the sun's steady course. Both systems ran side by side, interlocking every 52 years, yet often drifting in and out of step. Priests, trained in the long rhythms of time, learned to track both not by memory alone, but through careful observation. When an important decision loomed, they consulted both calendars and looked for agreement. A day that aligned in both systems carried power. But when dates clashed, when one calendar called for movement and the other signaled stillness, they turned to the sky, and it was the mirror, polished obsidian shaped into a shallow bowl, that helped settle the difference. Set on a carved base within a darkened chamber, the mirror caught the first light of Venus as it reappeared from behind the Sunday. This appearance, brief and exact, acted as the tiebreaker. If the calendars disagreed, and Venus returned bright and on time, then the day was taken as favorable. If not, the decision waited. Could a mirror, lit by starlight, really decide when to plant, when to trade, when to risk travel? To the Maya, it was not the light itself that mattered, but the timing of the light. The reflection told them the sky was stable, the cycles predictable, and the time safe. Records found on plaster walls and etched into stone stelae showed that key events, battles, alliances, pilgrimages, were often launched when both calendars aligned and Venus confirmed the date. This system did not remove risk, but it managed it. In farming, wrong timing could mean ruined harvests. In trade, it meant bandits or storms. But by tying decisions to predictable sky patterns, the Maya reduced uncertainty. Villages moved in harmony with stars, not just with leaders. The people could feel when the rhythm was right, not just because they were told, but because the signs were visible to all. Was this system primitive, or was it an early form of scheduling, refined over centuries of watching the sky? In modern terms, it worked like a filter: 2 internal dates, 1 external confirmation. And that final check came not from a book or a voice, but from a mirror catching a returning star. Beneath the raised stand where the mirror once rested, a small stone box had been tucked carefully into the floor. Its lid was plain, but inside lay a set of objects arranged with quiet intent: tiny shell counters, rounded and smoothed by hand, and flat pieces of charcoal etched with short marks. Each item was worn from touch, not age alone, and the placement suggested frequent use rather than ceremonial display. The shells were grouped in 5s, 10s, and 20s, while the char sticks bore notches, some filled with red pigment. Together they resembled a basic accounting kit, a tally system used to track cycles and quantities. When compared to other ledgers carved in stone or painted on codices, the layout matched entries for grain, salt, obsidian, and jade, the 4 core trade goods that supported many Maya economies. What stood out was the rhythm of the entries. They followed not moon cycles or rainfall, but Venus intervals. Every appearance and disappearance of the morning star seemed to mark a shift from gather to store, from hold to move. Could this box have once served as the final check before goods were released from storage? When the mirror confirmed a safe week, a shell was moved, a stick turned, and the signal passed quietly through the village. The tally tools made the invisible visible. Rather than counting with voice or guesswork, the priest used a steady, physical system that tied time to material wealth. In this sense, timing governed not just planting or war, but economics. Trade was not free-flowing but carefully paced. Road stations knew when to expect caravans. Markets saw fewer surprises, and households, warned in advance, prepared their offerings and needs. The ledger beside the glass told a different kind of history, not one of kings or battles, but of balance. Could timing alone have prevented shortages, avoiding waste and risk by holding goods until the stars gave the sign? The Maya did not leave these tools in temples or tombs alone. They placed them in rooms built for thinking, measuring, and adjusting. Wealth was not hoarded but managed, and the true value came not from the items themselves, but from knowing when to use them. The obsidian mirror set the pace. The ledger recorded the motion. One reflected the stars. Together, they formed a cycle both fragile and exact, a partnership between sky and survival. In the years after the conquest swept across the Maya lowlands, a friar named Diego de Landa wrote down a brief but telling observation. Among the confiscated items found in a priest's wooden chest, he described a curious object, a small polished black stone. He called it a mirror of lies, dismissing it as a trick tool used by sorcerers to speak with spirits and deceive villagers. But while he condemned it, he also preserved its memory. That short note became a clue. It confirmed that even after the collapse of Maya royal courts and the burning of sacred codices, these black mirrors still remained in quiet use. They survived not in temples or palaces, but in private homes, tucked inside boxes, handled by those who still remembered how to watch the sky. The friar may have misunderstood its use, but his description echoed the obsidian discs found in ruins centuries older. Could it be that the same tools used to guide decisions in grand cities had quietly slipped into the hands of local priests and farmers, repurposed yet still active? To the Spanish, it was superstition. To the Maya, it may have remained a calendar, a clock, a trusted eye on the heavens. Perhaps the priest who owned it didn't see it as magical, but as practical a mirror to time the planting season or warn of the rains. While European priests saw mirrors as symbols of idolatry, their function in the Maya world may have shifted without losing their purpose. Black mirrors did not vanish. They adapted. Other colonial notes, brief and scattered, tell similar stories. Spanish officials recorded mirror-like objects, hidden in walls, buried in graves, or passed between families. The records are short, often mocking, but the pattern is clear. These tools stayed close to the people, and they weren't ceremonial showpieces. They were still being used. Their value wasn't in gold or artistry, but in the rhythm they offered a way to match human life with the movement of the sky. Even as friars banned the old ceremonies and destroyed altars, the mirrors persisted, not through rebellion, but through quiet repetition. Their use may have gone underground, but it never fully stopped. That single black disc in a priest's chest may have still marked Venus's return, may have still helped a village decide when to plant or when to move. Ironically, the very people who tried to erase Maya knowledge also became its unwilling archivists. By writing down what they found, they gave later generations a window into what survived. The obsidian mirror, kept in a wooden box, became a symbol of resistance through usefulness. It outlived kings, cities, and even language shifts, not through war, but through watching. This was no illusion. The mirror lasted because it worked. The ancient white roads of the Maya, known as Sakbiob, stretched like pale veins across dense forests, binding cities, villages, and distant ports into a network of movement and meaning. We walked those raised limestone paths, still firm under centuries of root and rain, and found their rhythm not just in the stone, but in the stops. Way stations, placed almost exactly one day's travel apart, marked a pattern. Each one showed signs of rest and record. Inside, traces of painted plaster clung to the walls, some marked with faint lines and symbols. By matching these against known glyphs, we read the lists: salt cakes, cacao beans, woven cloth, obsidian blades, cargo bound for the coast or inland markets. What stood out was timing. These weren't constant shipments. They moved in bursts, aligned with specific weeks. By comparing these records to known Venus cycles and safe travel intervals, a striking pattern emerged. Delays dropped when shipments launched during Venus-safe periods. Weeks when the planet's appearance signaled clear weather, safe passage, and low spiritual risk. When traders moved with the sky, fewer goods were lost, fewer stations abandoned. The schedule wasn't guesswork. It followed a mirrored rhythm, likely guided from a central location: a priest's chamber, a mirror room, a tower where black glass caught the light of dawn. Could a single flash in a mirror signal dozens of villages to start packing? The evidence leaned yes. This was not superstition, but logistics. The Venus calendar, cross-checked with the 260-day and 365-day counts, offered a narrow band of optimal travel weeks. Outside those, roads grew dangerous, flooded, ambushed, cursed. Inside them, they ran like arteries of gold. Trade was survival, but timing was control. The more precise the mirror's reading, the more wealth flowed. One glyph set, found near a coastal terminal, showed a clear formula: 2 calendar dates tied to one route. When the 3 matched, caravans moved. When they didn't, they waited. Was this why the roads endured? Not just because of stone, but because they pulsed in time with the stars. What we saw was not chaos, but coordination, a civilization that linked its feet to the heavens. The Sakbe wasn't just a road, it was a clock, and the mirror, held far from the coast, far from the dust, quietly sent its signal to the edge of the sea. Not far from the trading paths and temple stairs, fields once stretched in neat rows beside natural sinkholes that opened into underground water. These deep water holes, called cenotes, were sacred to the Maya, but they also served a practical purpose. They gave nearby crops a steady water source in dry seasons. Around these watery centers, ancient farmers marked their land with lines of ash and stone. Some were burned, some freshly planted, and others left to rest. From above, the layout revealed a rotation system: burn, plant, rest. But the timing of these steps was not random. Layers of pollen in the soil, mixed with fine charcoal, told a story of order. Planting often followed a star's return, especially Venus. When its light reappeared after a long pause in the sky, certain fields were burned or seeded. Could this mean farmers used the mirror's reading to guide when to clear and when to plant? It appeared so. Crops did best when roots met rain. Not too early, not too late. And by syncing planting with sky cycles, the Maya avoided wasted effort. A star's reappearance didn't bring the rain, but it signaled when the rain might come. That tiny shift, from guesswork to guidance, made the difference between hunger and surplus. Stone markers at the edge of fields had small grooves, likely used to line up with a nearby viewing spot. Some still pointed east, toward known Venus rise points. This meant timing wasn't left to chance. It was measured, checked, and shared. Villages that once seemed remote now looked deeply connected, not by trade alone, but by shared sky rhythms. Could it be that timing, not tools or seeds, was the real farming breakthrough? The mirror, quiet and dark, held answers that turned into full baskets months later. Even in harsh ground, the system gave life. Some rows matched lunar events too, hinting at layers of timing, all cross-checked by those who knew how to read both land and sky. The field became a calendar. The mirror became the page. And behind each good harvest was a system, not luck. This was not myth or magic. It was planning. And the deeper we looked, the more we saw it farming not shaped by soil alone, but by a schedule written in light and glass. Long before the sound of war reached the cities, silence came first. Maya chronicles described a strange calm before many recorded battles, with no wind, no torches, and no noise in the streets. On those nights, moonlight stood still, and stars took center stage. Among them, one light rose with special weight, Venus, known to the Maya as a celestial warrior. Its return after weeks of vanishing below the horizon marked not only a moment of awe, but a cue. Could this appearance have been the quiet signal that turned watchful peace into planned attack? At sites like Tikal and Calakmul, great centers that rivaled each other in size and strength, the timing of major conflicts matched the predictable reappearance of Venus. When that star returned, hidden behind the morning sun for weeks before finally rising again, troops moved. The strategy seemed consistent. Wait for clear nights, steady air, no moonlight, and then strike just after Venus showed. The star's light offered no weapon, no shield, but it brought an edge. It let leaders align soldiers, messengers, and decisions to a moment that others might not expect. Even the journey to war, across dense forest and winding rivers, required precision. Food needed to be packed, messengers sent, and commanders warned, all in rhythm. So rather than act on impulse, the Maya appeared to follow a system. The mirror, once aligned and checked, would reflect the return of Venus, confirming that a sacred window had opened. Could this timing have reduced risk, allowing leaders to launch surprise raids when their enemies were least prepared? The chronicles didn't say it outright, but the patterns repeated too often to be chance. On the night Venus rose, fires were lit with care. Drums began low and slow, and the first warriors moved in silence. It wasn't superstition. It was planning, and planning gave power. The sky didn't just light the way. It marked the start, and the obsidian mirror, dark, smooth, and carefully polished, may have been the final check. The Maya didn't fight for chaos. They fought with calendars, and as strange as it sounds today, war may have begun not with a shout, but with a reflection, a flash of light in black glass. In a quiet room, on a night when the stars were perfectly still, along the low, salt-bleached docks of the eastern coast, beneath layers of coral and silt, divers uncovered heavy stone weights, carved with dots and slashes, their surfaces smoothed by years of tide. Some were tied to faded lengths of cord, knotted in patterns that seemed more than random. These were not just anchors. They were markers, part of a coded system to record weight, count, and time. Clay tablets and bark paper scrolls found in sealed storage niches listed cargo by week numbers rather than days, a sign of planning tied to cycles rather than dates. Storm seasons were marked with red symbols and left empty. Calm bands showed high activity. The patterns matched what the obsidian mirrors predicted. Sky readings had selected when the sea was safe. By matching Venus cycles and moon phases, port watchers could decide when to load, launch, or hold. Trade moved in pulses, guided not by luck, but by reflection. Could the mirror have become the harbor master's clock? The loss rates told a story. Wreckage sites dropped during these planned windows, while profit records rose. Textiles, cacao, salt cakes, and obsidian blades moved across the water in sync with sky-watched cues. Some mirrored discs, though cracked, were found buried near landings, each set into small stone mounts. The mounts angled skyward, fixed to match evening points where Venus would shine just before setting. At those moments, the last ships would leave, using the star not for faith but for timing. Even wind and tide had limits, but reflection added another guide. A port without a mirror risked delay, damage, or death, but a port with one could thrive, turning tidewatch into a science. This wasn't superstition. It was early logistics. Did Maya sea traders work with astronomers more than sailors? Their records leaned that way. Strings with knots, a form of record known in later cultures as quipu, might have held schedules built from star tables, not spoken plans. Could one cord and one mirror shape all coastal movement? The idea may seem bold, but the evidence matched. Trade, like farming or war, ran on timing, and someone, long before clocks or compasses, used light, angle, and memory to write when not to sail. In doing so, they gave the coast not just safety, but rhythm. Ships became part of the same pulse that moved inland grain and mountaintop jade, and at its heart stood the dark glass, waiting for its moment to shine and say, "Now." In the shaded corners of village homes and the quiet halls of larger estates, a simple set of instruments was often found, small enough to fit inside a woven pouch, yet powerful enough to guide whole communities. A polished black mirror, no larger than a hand, lay wrapped in cloth to protect its surface. Next to it, a stone dial marked with pecked indentations showed a repeating pattern of days, not hours. Beside these sat cords, with evenly spaced knots, and a thin stick blackened by soot, likely used to draw or mark alignment points on plaster walls or bark paper sheets. This was not a royal collection, nor a temple's treasure. It was a toolkit, practical and plain, yet packed with meaning. Any village elder could use it. Any minor lord could fund dozens. And with it came the ability to bring sky-based timing into the daily lives of people who had never seen the great observatories. Could this have been how the Maya scaled their systems of order and rhythm across such a wide and rugged land? With tools like these, timing was no longer elite. It was accessible, replicable, and portable. A field could be burned and planted at the right week. A canoe could launch on a safe tide. A new wall could rise when omens aligned. These decisions no longer required a grand tower or a royal court. They required only patience, training, and trust in a dark glass and its light. Some of these kits were found intact, sealed in small clay pots, while others appeared buried near road markers, suggesting their use during travel or trade. They may have also served as teaching sets, shared among families and passed down like recipes or tools of craft. Could it be that the true genius of Maya civilization lay not just in its cities but in its consistency? Each village, guided by its own mirror, could sync with the larger rhythms of the region. When Venus rose or set, when moon cycles shifted, the entire land seemed to move with it, not by force, but by agreement. Could the real strength of the empire have been timing, not conquest? The answer might lie in the fact that these kits appear in both rich and humble contexts. They had no gold, no jade, no jewels, yet they were cared for, used, and often buried with respect. Their value came not from what they were made of, but from what they helped people make. Choices that worked. A good clock in a hard world was worth more than treasure. And in these quiet homes, where no priest stood and no stone soared, a simple mirror gave the stars a voice and the people a plan. On a worn page of a Maya codex, rows of numbers stretched in silence, their meaning hidden behind bars and dots. At first glance, they seemed like dry figures, a list without a story. But when read aloud and counted with care, a rhythm emerged. Each number marked a step in the movement of Venus, the bright wanderer in the sky. The rows formed a cycle, repeating every few hundred days, with key points set for its rise, disappearance, and return. The Maya had mapped these moments, using the table to predict the planet's actions like a gear turning in a known machine. When the count slipped, as all systems eventually did, the priests added small corrections, short extra days or skipped marks, to reset the track. These were not flaws. They were fine-tunings, signs of a living system that could adjust itself. On cloudy nights or in bad seasons, the mirror came into play. Its dark surface helped priests confirm when Venus had truly returned after its long absence, and that reading kept the table aligned. Without it, the count could drift. With it, the book and the glass worked as a pair, one holding memory, the other holding light. Could this partnership be the reason why their timing lasted for centuries? The codex, fragile and flammable, survived only in parts, but what remained matched the sky with eerie precision. Even modern charts of Venus's motion echo the same cycles the Maya once wrote down. The codex page was more than a record. It was a gear in a larger engine, driving decisions across markets, wars, and harvests. By knowing when Venus would rise or vanish, leaders could time events with confidence. The mirror kept the table true, while the table gave the mirror context. Could any machine be simpler or more powerful? Two tools, both silent, yet together they formed the pulse of an empire. The priests who used them were not just readers of stars, but keepers of the clockwork. Their choices kept cities fed and roads safe. Their fixes turned chaos into order. Even after temples crumbled and books were burned, echoes of that cycle lived on in oral stories and planting songs. In a world without iron gears or ticking clocks, the Maya had built an engine from memory and stone, and it ran not on fuel, but on trust in the sky. In Maya towns, markets were more than places to trade. They were woven into the rhythm of life, and their timing often followed the stars. Women brought baskets filled with cacao, cloth, maize, and dyes. Men carried tools, salt cakes, and dried fish. Yet these goods did not flow freely every week. Hidden patterns showed up in shell tokens and weighted stones found in the stalls. Some weeks showed more trades, others fewer fines. Records carved into plaster showed lighter punishments on days that followed calm skies. Why? Because people chose those days with care. Vendors traveled when the roads were safest, often matching the quiet bands of the Venus cycle. When the mirror showed a return or a clear window between rains, trade swelled. Travel during storm weeks or bad omens brought risk. Fights rose, goods spoiled. But when market days matched the sky, things moved smoother. Fewer disputes broke out. Fewer guards were needed. Even family events seemed to follow the same clock. Marriage agreements, often sealed with gifts exchanged in the market, clustered around weeks known for calm winds and open roads. Could it be that timing wasn't just about stars and kings, but also about kitchens and cradles? Women, especially, seemed to read the patterns. Their baskets held more than food. They carried memory, season, and knowledge passed by mothers and midwives. Was the mirror's guidance passed quietly through them as well? Archaeologists rarely find their voices written down, but the flow of goods, the spacing of trades, the timing of births and unions, all pointed to their role. The mirror's reflection touched more than councils and temples. It guided daily life: when to plant, when to pack, when to rest, and when to walk. A cheap tool, yet its impact was rich. Even in small towns, these patterns repeated. It wasn't magic. It was a map, and the people who used it had learned that the stars did not just rule gods, they ruled safety. As Venus came and went, so did risk and peace. Market stalls followed the stars like crops followed the rains. And if a family could avoid danger by waiting a few days more, they did. The result was a system where even the humblest trade, the quietest sale, moved to the beat of light across the sky. And behind it all, always, was the mirror. Not in a palace, but in a village, in a hand, guiding, without a word. In the ruins near Uxmal, carved marks left by builders still line the old stone walls. These were not decorations, but mason marks, small signs used to track crews, work stages, or the timing of certain tasks. Many of these marks clustered around long walls shaped to break the wind, hinting that timing mattered as much as placement. Builders had learned through trial and season that mortar cured best when the wind was still. Walls and vaults placed in these windows lasted longer, with fewer cracks and tighter seals. Could this knowledge have come from above? From the sky? The marks, when matched with the Venus calendar, formed a pattern. Calm weeks, lined up with days when the bright planet rose in certain parts of the sky. Builders may have used this link to pick the best times to set stones or finish rooftops. One vaulted chamber, still holding firm centuries later, showed exact signs of this care. Its setting lines matched a season known for steady sun and quiet air. A broken shard of obsidian was found near the foundation, polished dark and scratched from frequent use. It may have once been part of a mirror used to track the sky. But how could a mirror help builders avoid wind? It didn't show wind itself, but it helped track time, and time was tied to wind shifts. Those who read the stars knew when air moved, when it calmed, and when it surged. This rhythm was not written in books, but in the walls. A piece of dark glass, a chalk stick, and a string dial were all that was needed to follow it. Near one collapsed stair, bundles of string were found tied to small pegs, possibly once used to draw angles or track the changing light. Could this have been part of the same kit? The tools looked simple, but the results were not. Cities rose with vaults wide enough to span temples and halls, and those vaults held firm because someone waited for the right wind. Time became a kind of material, like stone or clay. Builders planned their movements not only by design, but by sky. The mirror gave them a way to know when to pause and when to place the keystone. Some cities that ignored these windows showed more damage, more rebuilds. But Uxmal, with its careful vault lines and preserved roofs, hinted at a system that worked. Was this how architecture turned into legacy? How stone survived where kingdoms fell? If so, then the secret wasn't only in the skill of the hand, but in the rhythm of the air. The mirror, passed from priest to builder, helped more than rituals. It made walls that stood through storms. Wind, once feared, became something to follow, not fight. And the quiet curve of an old tool, dark as night and smooth as water, helped make that possible. In years when the rains failed and rivers ran low, life in Maya villages slowed. Markets thinned, roads emptied, and couriers stopped carrying baskets of salt or cacao. But among some of these villages, the signs of panic were less. Clay tablets and soot-marked sticks showed more hold entries than move entries during these dry seasons. Grain was stored, not sold. Families stayed close, and fields rested. In one case, a village near a dry cenote cut its hunger rates by half compared to others nearby, simply by pacing its movements. What triggered this restraint? A piece of polished black stone found in a home shrine may hold the answer. It was not broken, not hidden. It had been used until its center dulled, its edges smoothed by touch. Could the people there have used the mirror to read the sky, not for ceremony, but for survival? When Venus dimmed or shifted out of phase, it marked a warning. These changes, tied to rainfall patterns, helped priests mark the likely start of a drought. The mirror, reflecting this shift, became a quiet signal. It didn't stop the drought. It told the people how to move through it. Weeks were marked, not by moonlight or guesswork, but by celestial cues. When the sky said to hold, they held. Trade paused. Gatherings shrank. Crops were measured down to the last kernel. In other villages, less tied to sky counting, shipments went out too long. When the drought deepened, there was little left. But in the village with the mirror, even in lean months, small jars of grain lined homes. Could a single reflective tool shape a town's fate? The evidence leaned in that direction. Records etched in plaster walls showed a series of weeks with no movement, precisely when Venus vanished from sight. It was as if the people paused with the star. Could this method have passed by word of mouth, from priest to farmer, from elder to mother? And if so, how many generations survived because of it? Droughts did not strike without signs, and the Maya, with their sky-watching tools, seemed to know how to read them. The mirror offered no magic, just rhythm. But in rhythm lay preparation. A silent agreement formed between sky and soil. When to sow, when to store, when to wait. The loss shrank, not because they fought the drought, but because they followed time. In a world where one bad harvest could break a family, the ability to slow down became a kind of wealth. That dark piece of glass, humble and worn, became not just a tool, but a guide. In its stillness, it reflected more than light. It showed the wisdom of holding still. Beneath the calm surface of sacred cenotes, divers uncovered more than ritual. In the deep silt, clusters of jade beads, carved shells, and small stone figures were found placed with exact counts: 52, 104, 260. These were not random numbers. They matched key cycles in the Maya calendar. The number 52 marked the full turning of the calendar round, a shared cycle between the 260-day sacred count and the 365-day solar count. The number 104 marked two of these rounds, while 260 reflected a full sacred count. The objects, grouped so precisely, looked more like entries in a ledger than random gifts. Could these offerings have acted as receipts, dropped into the water to mark the completion or delay of a decision? The idea changed how we viewed the cenote from a place of mystery to one of memory. Each item, placed with intention, marked a point in time. Perhaps a journey was delayed, or a harvest spared, and the offering was made to acknowledge it. The cenote, then, became a kind of archive. Just as a scribe would keep tally with a soot stick, so too did the people log their choices in the depths. Did families come with beads not for luck, but to record their timing? Could this water serve as both witness and vault? These questions invited a new reading of old actions. The Maya calendar was not kept only in books or on stone walls. It lived in the rhythm of choices, in markets, wars, marriages, and planting days. And here, it lived at the bottom of a pool. Even the spacing of items showed care. In one case, a single large bead lay apart from a set of 52 smaller ones, as if marking a special day within the cycle. Could that lone bead signal a change in leadership, or the start of a war? The evidence leaned toward planning, not impulse. If the mirror showed when, the cenote showed that the people listened. Faith and planning met on the same timeline. Rituals did not erase logic. Instead, they confirmed it. The offerings became a public memory, silent, sunken proof that a schedule had been followed. And in hard years, when drought or war shook the land, the same numbers appeared again. More holds, fewer moves. But always, the cycle stayed. The items dropped into water held more than weight. They carried decisions, hopes, and the discipline of those who understood the sky. These were not raw. In the heart of one Maya city, a rift formed not over land or tribute, but over time itself. As public life pulsed with festivals, processions, and ceremonies, a subtle conflict brewed between those who read the sky and those who ruled the streets. Some elites, eager to display power or please visiting allies, began shifting festival dates. These leaders did not wait for the mirror's reading. Instead, they pushed celebrations into weeks that broke the timing tradition. The priests, holding fast to the long counts and Venus cycles, resisted quietly. Their records stayed loyal to the calendar, not the crown. One account from a burnt palace in a southern lowland site told the story in fragments. Charred murals and broken seal marks hinted at a festival forced out of season. The mirror had not marked the right window, yet the feast went forward. Music played, drums echoed, and lanterns lit the plaza. Then came the wind. A storm rolled in fast, strong enough to tear roofs and flood storehouses. Lightning struck the palace edge. Flames caught the thatched upper floors and spread before the fire crews arrived. Granaries burned, and years of dried food vanished in hours. After the smoke, the city slowed. The next planned celebration was delayed. The mirror was consulted again, and slowly, the dates returned to their patterns. Was this palace fire a punishment from the gods, or just weather made worse by pride? Could the mirror have predicted safer days, if only it had been heeded? The questions lingered, not just in ash, but in policy. Over time, inscriptions shifted tone. New rulers praised balance, not boldness. They honored the watchers of the sky, not just the lords of the land. And so, a quiet war of calendars ended not with swords, but with silence. The priests did not need to argue. Their tools, tested by seasons and storms, spoke clearly. When followed, life flowed. When ignored, risk surged. Could this story explain why timing survived even as dynasties fell? Might this quiet return to the mirror's rule be why its legacy lasted? These questions hint at a truth the Maya knew well: that power drawn from nature is greater than power drawn from names. The conflict between show and schedule, between pageant and patience, marked more than one city. But it was not always written in stone. Sometimes it was felt in the wind, heard in the crack of wood, seen in the soot of a night gone wrong. The mirror's calm return after chaos was not just a practical shift, but a cultural one. Time had to be earned, not commanded. And those who tried to bend it too far found that fire answered where words could not. In this way, the mirror's quiet authority proved lasting, not by force, but by being right when it mattered most. In the deep forests of what is now Guatemala, two of the greatest Maya powers faced off for centuries, Tikal and Calakmul. Their rivalry shaped roads, alliances, and even the rise and fall of minor kingdoms caught in between. Yet beneath the tension and the towers, both cities turned their eyes to the same sky. Each tracked Venus with care, watching for its rise after long absences, and using its return to mark their moves. Inscriptions from both sites listed war campaigns, royal ascensions, and trade embargoes that lined up not by accident, but by design. When Calakmul marched, Tikal often paused, not in fear, but in calculation. The mirror, placed inside their sacred towers, showed them when to wait and when to act. Could it be that Venus served as a shared clock in a time of constant conflict? The pattern suggested as much. One mural at Calakmul showed a lord standing beside a disk of dark stone as his advisors looked up. The date matched a week when Venus had just returned. That same week, at Tikal, carvings marked troop movements delayed, not cancelled. It seemed both sides played chess with the same calendar. The mirror did not make peace, but it did bring structure. War turned into strategy, not guesswork. And because attacks avoided storm seasons and bad omen weeks, losses stayed lower. Cities were not leveled without care. Some theorists ask, did the shared timing act as an unspoken treaty, a rulebook that both sides followed even while fighting? Or was it simply the best way to win by letting the sky teach patience? Either way, the mirror became more than a local tool. It turned into a force that shaped empires. At times, when one city ignored the rhythm, the results were harsh. Calakmul once broke the pattern, launching a surprise strike before Venus completed its cycle. The raid hit hard, but also drew drought and disease that year. Records showed few victories after. The following campaigns returned to the old timing. If both cities had the same map of the sky, could their rivalry have been more predictable than it seemed? Might this explain why neither ever truly destroyed the other? For generations, the struggle continued. Never total collapse. Always a shift, a pause, a response. The mirror's reading gave each side a plan and gave the people below some measure of safety. Markets stayed open longer. Roads were cleared before troops advanced. And when silence returned after battle, the stars still moved, pulling the future forward. The shared sky gave order even in division. Power, in both cities, respected time. And through the mirror, time became more than a measure, it became a weapon. A weapon that struck not with fear, but with foresight. In the dry lowlands and jungle roads once ruled by the Maya, clay bracelets have surfaced fragile bands marked with deep notches along their rims. They were not jewelry, not charms, but tools. Each bracelet held a pattern of cuts that matched the Venus cycle and the mirror readings taken back home. Merchants wore them as moving calendars, light enough to carry, durable enough to survive the road. Before a journey, a priest or elder would set the first notch in alignment with a key sky event, often the reappearance of Venus after its disappearance. That mark became the trip's anchor. From there, each notch along the bracelet signaled a day to move, to rest, or to avoid risk. The clay, once soft, was hardened by fire, and the pattern it carried turned distance into time. Traders moving salt, cacao, jade, or feathers followed these codes like instructions. Camps and checkpoints appeared at intervals that matched the bracelet's rhythm. This system helped keep travel steady, not rushed, especially through zones where rain flooded paths or bandits waited. Did the bracelets allow merchants to turn invisible, slipping through dangers simply by moving with the right timing? In one burial site near a trade hub, several bracelets were found stacked beside a pouch of tokens and worn shoes. The wear on the bracelets showed long use, not ceremonial storage. This was a daily object, a tool of survival. Traders likely passed the skill of reading them through apprenticeships, not temples. The mirror's role came early. Its reading at the start of the journey told the traveler when to depart. After that, the bracelet carried the plan. It kept time for those without stars in view. Could this have been the reason sea and inland routes linked so well? Even across great distances. Even when storms disrupted sails or rains blocked trails, traders could adjust using their notch codes. The rhythm held, even if the road shifted. On return, the same mirror would greet them, resetting the cycle for another loop. Unlike large codices or carved tablets, The bracelet fit in a pocket or around a wrist. Its power came from its simplicity. Like a paper map marked for a single trip, it needed no reading skills beyond touch and memory. Merchants had no time for books, but they understood pace. One theory suggests each region had its own notch pattern, fine-tuned to local seasons and threats. If so, the mirror unified many codes into one sky. While kings looked for omens, traders looked for windows. And through these bracelets, they carried those windows with them, step by step. The mirror's guidance did not stop at the city gate. It walked the road, it crossed the hills, and through these humble clay rings, it turned time into trust, making sure that what mattered most, safe return, came with a rhythm that could be worn. Across the villages that once lined the Maya lowlands, the mirror's influence extended quietly into daily life, touching not just kings or warriors, but mothers, elders, and healers. Midwives, skilled in timing birth rituals, began their work by watching the calendar for rest weeks periods marked as calm or safe in the sky's cycle. These rest windows often followed the reappearance of Venus or a cooling phase of the moon. During these weeks, household chores eased, water trips shortened, and even trade slowed. Births timed to these periods, when villages were quieter and the roads less crowded, meant more care, more hands to help, and fewer fevers. In one highland village, layers of ash and pollen from old hearths marked steady cycles of burning and boiling, revealing that water was often fetched early, just before mid-morning heat surged. Families used the mirror's signals to track these cooler hours, avoiding sun-struck wells or tainted runoff. The link between the chart and daily chores became one of quiet efficiency. Healers, too, followed this rhythm. They timed herb hunts not simply by the season, but by the week and even the hour. Certain plants, known for calming fevers or easing childbirth, were gathered during colder nights when dew clung to their leaves. These subtle cues came not from guesswork, but from tables read beside polished black stone. Could it be that the most important medicine wasn't a leaf or root, but the hour it was touched? We found one set of bones buried with 2 bracelets, a small mirror shard, and bundles of dried herbs sealed in clay. The tools showed how health was managed by timing, not just skill. During years of drought or unrest, the mirror's quiet advice carried more weight than a king's call. By pacing the most basic acts, when to cook, when to carry, when to rest, the calendar gave strength back to the home. Children born in sync with these patterns had higher survival rates, a pattern seen in village records, scratched onto pot shards and painted walls. Could this system of timing have saved entire communities from collapse during harder years? One theory suggests that what the Maya knew best was not just the stars, but when to pause. Healing did not come from the mirror itself, but through its use, the chaos of nature became more bearable. The burden of survival, shared by a rhythm everyone could follow. In homes made of woven reed and plastered earth, life moved by quiet signals. The mirror, small enough to hold in a hand, turned time into a medicine of its own, giving every household, rich or poor, a chance to plan around the harshness of the world. In the end, it wasn't just crops or trade that the mirror improved, but the very breath and heartbeat of daily life. Inside the ancient city of Palenque, deep within one of its stepped stone structures, a small room once faced the rising Sunday. Tucked behind larger ceremonial chambers, it held no altar or throne, only a polished floor, smooth from use. In the center sat a simple stone base, round and flat, with scorched marks at its edge and lime residue at its heart. From the doorway, early morning light would fall across the floor. We measured its path and traced its narrow reach. discovering that it struck the base precisely during key Venus events, especially during the morning star's first rise after disappearance. These days held deep meaning to the Maya. The base almost certainly once held a mirror, a disk of polished obsidian. This tool was not ornamental, but active. When dawn broke and the light moved through the stone door, it met the mirror's surface and bounced upward, likely reflecting onto the kneeling figure, who waited with care. The priest, seated just behind the beam, would not simply look but read. In that moment, the reflection acted as confirmation, not just of the star's return, but of the right day, the right season, and the right choice. Was this small, silent ritual the true start of larger events, festivals, feasts, or even declarations? The floor's polish told us something more. It showed wear in one distinct position, a sign of repeated kneeling. This wasn't a place of gathering, but of routine, a place where timing mattered more than ceremony. And the room itself had no windows, no noise, only one doorway. It filtered the world into a narrow experience, light on stone, mirror to eye. Could this room have been the original clock for the palace? Not mechanical, but celestial, one that used no gears, only shadow and reflection. What made this even more intriguing was its secrecy. The room had no grand staircase or carved lintels. It was hidden in form as much as in purpose. Its simplicity masked its precision. One priest, one mirror, one shaft of light. And yet from this quiet pairing, decisions may have flowed through the kingdom. The mirror turned Venus into something the mind could hold and the hand could use. Rituals began not with drums, but with a flicker of light across glass. We often imagine ancient temples as loud, crowded places. But this room suggests a different truth. That power could begin in silence. That knowledge could live in corners, not courtyards. And that the most important decisions of an empire may have started when one man sat alone in a room, watching the light arrive. How many leaders waited for this single reading before they acted? How many lives moved because one mirror caught one star at just the right moment? The room, though small, echoed with that power, its walls still remembering the rhythm of dawn, and the shape of time made visible. Across Maya lands, taxes were not always coins or counted goods. Most tribute came in kind grains, cloth, salt, honey given not at random but at rhythm. Tribute lists carved into stone or painted on plaster, lined up with planting and travel windows. They told when a village was due to send goods, and often that timing matched the mirror charts. Dry weeks were chosen for grain, when roads stayed firm and the crops stored clean. Cloth was sent on cool nights when dyes held better and mold spread slower. These weren't guesses. They were patterns. The mirror helped pick them. By watching Venus and cross-checking it with the sun and moon, priests could tell when to move, when to wait. Those dates became the tax calendar, and the results showed. Villages that paid during sky-matched weeks lost less to spoilage. Less food turned bad. Less cloth tore or stained. More goods made it to the city in full. And records show that when deliveries arrived as planned, punishments fell. Fewer beatings, fewer fines, fewer forced labor rounds. Not because rulers were kinder, but because the system worked. Could this have been a reason order held strong across such a wide land? When rules followed nature's clock, resistance slowed. Taxes didn't feel like theft, but like timing. Some tablets even show small gifts sent back when loads came early or whole. These signs suggest that tribute was not just a duty, but a deal. A deal built on trust in the stars. Did villagers look up at the sky before setting out with their bundles, waiting for the same light that guided kings? If so, the mirror didn't just shape war and harvest. It shaped fairness. It turned tax from fear into rhythm. Even road stops, the small rest houses placed one day apart, showed chalk marks that matched sky charts. Some listed week numbers, others bore notch codes. Together, they formed a soft path, one that kept the wheels of the state turning without grinding the people beneath. Could that balance explain how such dense cities thrived with few standing armies? The power came not from force, but from flow. And the mirror, humble, round, and dark, was the hidden key. It didn't make people pay. It helped them pay right. That small shift, that harmony between law and light, built a kind of peace, not perfect, not without tension, but strong enough to last centuries. The more we read of these tribute lists, the clearer the pattern becomes. When the mirror chart set the rhythm, the system held. When it was ignored, records of revolt rose. So maybe order didn't come from gold, or even fear. Maybe it came from listening to the wind, the rain, and the star that always returned, right on time. Even the most trusted systems bend under pressure. Across the Maya world, the sacred tables that tracked Venus and the sun were not flawless. When the sky filled with smoke from far-off fires, or when heavy rain sent clouds to cover the dawn, the mirror could not always catch the light. Readings were missed. Days slipped. But the system did not collapse. Instead, it adjusted. Priests, careful in their task, logged each failure. We found small plaster walls inside chambers, with faint scratch marks. Numbers added, crossed, and added again. These were correction codes. When a key Venus day passed unseen, they counted forward or backward and recalibrated. Like a clock reset after a storm, the system regained its beat. Could this kind of honesty be why the people kept their faith in it? Unlike systems that hid faults, this one showed its work. Errors weren't buried. They were fixed. And more than that, the fixes worked. Crops still came. Markets still opened. Tributes still moved on time. We found that in some years, the delays were frequent, thick seasons of ash or cloud. But even then, the adjustments held the pattern close. It makes us wonder, how many modern systems fail because they fear correction? Here, the sky watchers were humble. They understood that nature had the final word. But they also knew that knowledge was not useless just because it was challenged. The mirror stayed in use even when it failed, because what came next was a recovery. The cycle resumed. Could this teach something larger about ancient science? That its strength was not in perfection, but in resilience? The records showed how the mirror and the codex worked together. When the glass went dark, the book added light. And when the book frayed or burned, the mirror retuned the page. This dance between tools kept time alive. The people knew it. Their trust was not blind. It was earned, season after season, by systems that admitted flaws but stayed reliable. We even saw regional differences. Some towns used longer reset periods, some shorter, but the logic stayed the same. Recognize the slip, then repair it. In a world shaped by cycles, even a pause had a place. Could this be why the Maya calendar was so complex, yet so lasting? Because it was built not on guesses, but on patterns strong enough to stretch. The scribes and priests who marked those plaster notes likely knew they were not just fixing numbers. They were holding together a civilization's rhythm. And for every mark that reset a date, a field got planted, a road opened, or a festival rang out on time. All because someone dared to say the count had slipped, and then dared to make it right. Obsidian, the dark volcanic glass used to make the Mayas' sacred mirrors, came from distant highland quarries where fire once touched stone. It was not found near most of the great lowland cities. Yet its presence was widespread, which meant it had to move. Heavy and brittle, the raw blanks were wrapped in fiber, and carried for weeks along trade paths that crossed mountains, rivers, and forests. When they reached the hands of skilled artisans, the real work began. These mirror smiths did not melt or mold. They chipped, pecked, and shaved the stone by hand, first with harder stones, then with sand, ash, and water. A fine slurry of soot and dust became their polish. We followed modern recreations to understand the time it took. Hours turned into days. The final polish, the one that revealed a clear reflection, was the slowest. One mirror might take a week or more. There were no shortcuts, no heat for shortcuts, no tools for haste. Could this long craft explain why these tools held such weight across centuries? A mirror was not just a tool. It was a commitment. A village might have only one. A priest might guard his for a lifetime. But it was never beyond reach. Obsidian was costly in time, not in silver. That kept it scarce enough to protect, yet common enough to spread. And once a mirror reached its shine, it lasted. Unlike cloth or reed, it did not rot. Even when shattered, pieces could be reused, reworked, or saved. Some were passed down, not broken. The mirror's value came not only from its shine, but from its path. It held memory. Dozens of hands, each step slow, gave it shape. Could this explain why mirrors were found in burial sites, court chambers, and quiet corners alike? The craft tied them to the land, but the reflection tied them to the sky. The shape was simple, usually round, sometimes oval, but the power lay in the precision. If the surface curved wrong, it scattered light. If the angle wobbled, the readings failed. So the maker's care had to last. And what of the polish itself? Some had flecks of red or gold, a trait from certain obsidian veins. These were not just cosmetic. In rare light, they added shimmer, a flicker, perhaps once mistaken for divine sign. Might this be why some mirrors were given names or kept in hidden rooms? The craft, once done, became sacred, not by spell, but by time. A good mirror did not predict. It marked. It waited. It reflected the world exactly as it was. No more, no less. And in that, it earned its place among the most powerful tools a people could hold, not because it glowed, but because it was trusted, made by hand, made to last, made to serve those who read the sky and wrote the rhythm of cities with glass and light. In city centers where courts once stood, 2 tables framed the room. One held records of disputes, work promises, loans, and family pledges. The other carried the calendar scrolls. Priests were not just spiritual guides. They acted as timekeepers. When people brought their cases, witnesses were heard. But so was the sky. Marriage contracts, market debts, and field hires were weighed not only by word, but by date. A worker who claimed a job began on a bad Venus week might be believed if the mirror readings said that week had been too risky for travel. A farmer who missed a payment could show he had paused during drought holds, as taught by the timing chart. This was not mercy. It was rhythm. Councils learned to trust the pattern. And in turn, the people trusted the councils. Records showed fewer penalties when the calendar aligned with judgment. Could fairness, then, be a matter of when as well as what? The mirror helped by ruling out poor choices before they began. If a road was unsafe, no delivery was expected. If a marriage was planned during a violent wind cycle, the wedding was moved, not fined. We found painted court scenes where scribes and priests stood shoulder to shoulder, one with ink, the other with chart. Together they checked if the terms matched the weeks. Could this blend of law and timing explain why some cities flourished longer than others? Their systems bent around nature, not over it. Delays weren't signs of weakness. They were wisdom. Even highland villages, far from royal courts, kept cords marked with safe weeks tied near house doors. The idea spread. Timing gave justice a solid floor. One case we traced followed a trader whose shipment was seized. He claimed his delay was due to the mirror reading back home. When the court saw the mirror had shown a storm path, they ruled in his favor. The goods returned, the deal held, and his record stayed clear. Simple fairness, shaped by stars. Not prophecy, not magic. Just shared rules. Did this system help calm disputes before they grew? It seemed so. And when you knew the next quiet window, you waited, rather than forced a bad step. The mirror, set in a small room or carried in a plain box, gave power not by command, but by calming chaos. Court was not just where laws were spoken. It became a place where time itself was respected. And in that respect, grew something rare in any age trust. A mirror and a table, a sky and a promise. Justice that flowed in time with the stars above. In quiet homes far from palaces, elders spoke of a strange sun that turned black. It was not a warning of doom, but a lesson in watching. The black sun meant a moment when light dimmed just enough for hidden things to be seen. We traced these stories to rooms built without windows, where small children were taught to sit still and look at polished black mirrors. With a narrow shaft of light angled in from above, the dark glass sometimes revealed specks, small reflections of bright stars, even during the day. To see them, a child had to wait. No fidgeting, no blinking. The stars would not show for the restless. This training taught more than just astronomy. It shaped the value of patience. Adults told how important it was to wait for the right day, the right wind, the right light. These skills mattered, not just in temples, but in homes, fields, and on trails. Could it be that timing knowledge was passed down less through charts and more through stories? The tale of the black sun may have been a tool, not just a myth. It helped parents explain why one must hold back, why not every day was good for planting or travel. Some homes even had small mirror niches, simple and cheap, but carved with care. We found soot stains above them, and seats worn smooth. These were learning spots, not classrooms, but spaces where knowledge passed quietly. A grandparent would whisper about the black sun, and the child would sit in the dark, waiting for a flash. The patience learned here later showed in market choices and travel starts. Could a simple moment in a shadowed room save a family's season? In some villages, the habit of watching stars through the mirror led to fewer ruined trips, fewer lost harvests. Timing was not just a skill for priests, it became a household trait. And across regions, people told the same tale: the sun once turned black, and in that darkness, truth appeared. We now think this meant a lesson, that clarity comes when you slow down. Some mirrors may have been old, passed down like heirlooms. Others were new, made by local hands. But each one, no matter how simple, carried a duty to teach the next in line how to see what others missed. Even when the mirrors dulled, even when the charts faded, the story stayed. The black sun showed hidden lines. It did not burn. It revealed. And by passing on this idea, even in bedtime tales or quiet chores, the people held on to something deeper than a tool. They held a rhythm. They lived by it. And in the stillness, they taught it. The tale of the Maya collapse often speaks of swift ruin, of temples abandoned and cities swallowed by trees. But the records told a different rhythm. We looked closer and saw not just endings, but movements. Some major centers did shrink. Their grand courts quieted, their roads cracked with weeds. Yet others, smaller and less studied, lit up in those same years. Mirror bases turned up far from the old capitals. They were simpler, carved in clay instead of stone, but they followed the same Venus counts. Could this mean that the knowledge did not fall, but shifted hands? The tools once held by kings now rested in the homes of village priests, and the sky remained the same. Even as power moved, the patterns above still gave answers. The sakbayub, the white roads, still showed use. Their wear lines matched travel seasons, quiet in storms, busy in clear weeks. Traders adapted. Families changed routes, but they still followed the safe windows the mirrors marked. Instead of seeing a collapse, we found a rebalancing. Some cities lost their shine, but others gained purpose. New centers grew near lakes and forests. Their murals showed fewer war scenes, more planting and birth. Was this a choice? A shift from conquest to care? Some pottery showed older glyphs reused, not forgotten. Even the errors stayed familiar. We found wall scratchings with the same count corrections from before. That meant the same method, still taught. The stars did not stop, and neither did the people. Why then? The myth of sudden fall. Perhaps outside eyes expected kings and stone. When those faded, they missed the quiet life that stayed. In one hill town, barely marked on maps, we uncovered a small court with a soot-stained mirror stand. Burn patterns showed it in use for decades after royal records stopped. The people didn't lose time. They kept it, and they used it to build a new rhythm. Could it be that survival came not from strength, but from timing? Even in the hardest drought years, hold weeks saved food. Traders walked farther, but lost less. Fields planted on calm weeks yielded more. It was not magic. It was pacing, and that made collapse a slow bend, not a break. The tools shrank. The rooms grew simpler. But the sky-led rhythm stayed. If the great Maya age ended, its heartbeat did not. We still see its echo in villages that plant by moonlight and hold market on Venus rise. The stars outlasted the stones, and those who watched them, quietly, endured. When Spanish forces swept through the lowlands, taking cities and temples, much of the old order was destroyed. Palaces burned, stelae toppled, and sacred texts were taken or burned. Yet in the records of church councils, faint traces remained. Notes described market days moved oddly, feasts delayed, or harvest gatherings set at unexpected intervals. At first, these seemed like clerical errors or superstition. But when cross-referenced with known Venus cycles, the patterns aligned. Traders and local leaders had hidden the timing tools, often in plain sight or secret chambers, while continuing to follow their rules. The mirrors themselves disappeared from public view, but the arithmetic, the counting, and the rhythm survived. Small tables, tally sticks, and coded bracelets persisted, teaching each new generation how to follow the old calendar without being seen. Could this covert practice explain why some towns continued smooth trade and stable harvests? Even under foreign rule? The mirror, though hidden, still cast its influence. Courts and priests adjusted to new laws, yet they respected the old schedule. Grain was stored and moved according to Venus weeks. Market days followed the same rhythm, even if the reason had to be whispered. The people's trust in the system did not vanish with flags or decrees. Instead, they adapted. Could it be that the mirror's greatest power was not its shine, but its ability to survive? Obsidian discs may have been hidden under floors, behind doors, or within private homes. The people safeguarded them not for ritual alone, but for the practical rhythm they maintained. Even church records, while attempting to normalize activity under new authority, unintentionally revealed these hidden calendars. Fewer shortages, more predictable trade, and safer travel all pointed back to the same cycles. The conquerors could take the palace, the scribe, or the stone, but the system's pulse, based on the sky, remained. This persistence proved something profound. Knowledge rooted in practicality, tested by generations, cannot be erased easily. The mirror became more than a tool. It was a bridge, linking past to present, even as rulers changed. It taught the importance of timing, resilience, and subtlety. Through hidden use, the people demonstrated that a strong tool outlives flags, armies, and laws. And though few knew its exact form, its effects continued, ensuring that life, trade, and survival remained guided by the same celestial rhythm that had shaped empires for centuries. In this way, the old clock kept turning, quietly asserting its presence beneath new banners, unseen but unbroken. A final record, carved on a thin strip of bark paper and preserved in a small vault, described a night that was remembered for its clarity. Venus shone brightly, hanging low above the eastern horizon, while the air carried a chill that touched the village rooftops and plazas. That week was marked not by ceremony alone, but by action. A marriage agreement took place between two important families, binding wealth and alliances. At the same time, a treaty between neighboring towns was sealed, promising cooperation over trade routes and shared fields. Grain stores, carefully measured and kept in central granaries, were released according to the same calendar. This single reading of the sky had ripples across three essential parts of daily life: union, diplomacy, and survival. Could one mirror, one reflection, shape an entire town's week in this way? The record suggests yes. Not a king, nor a council alone, dictated these moments. The dark obsidian disk, polished to a high sheen and placed on its stone base, reflected Venus in just the right position, signaling that the week's decisions could proceed. In quiet chambers and homes, elders consulted their own mirrors or counted marks along cords, matching the central reading. Even children, trained in observation, recognized the signs, understanding that the timing mattered more than the grandeur of ceremony. Trade flowed, vows were kept, and grain reached those who needed it most. Peace held through harvest, because action aligned with observation. It was a rare but perfect intersection of civic, personal, and agricultural life, all guided by the celestial pulse. Could this have been the culmination of centuries of practice? Every tool, every correction, every teaching had led to this moment. The mirror, simple and unassuming, served not just lords or priests, but whole communities. It acted as an invisible coordinator, ensuring that critical events were synchronized across households and plazas. We see, in this single reading, evidence of a system that valued order and rhythm above all else. The sky became a shared partner, providing clear signals for complex decisions. And although the great cities would eventually fade, the record captures a moment where knowledge, observation, and careful timing combined to protect society, strengthen bonds, and sustain life. The last clear reading of Venus was more than a celestial event. It was proof of a civilization's ability to organize itself in harmony with the stars, to trust in patterns, and to let a humble mirror guide the pulse of towns for generations. Along the worn stair edges of an ancient Maya temple, tiny dots etched into the stone caught our attention. Each was carefully placed, shallow but deliberate, aligned with the edge and spacing of the steps. At first glance, they seemed decorative or accidental, but when traced with chalk, a clear rhythm appeared. The intervals between dots matched the Venus cycle as recorded in distant codices and mirrored readings. Builders had baked the schedule into stone itself. Every careful step up or down could be read as a counting system, a visual tally of days and weeks. This was not mere ornamentation. It was a living calendar encoded into architecture. Could a person unfamiliar with the mirror still understand the rhythm by following these marks? Possibly. Even when mirrors shattered, when polished discs were lost or hidden, the walls preserved the count. Observers could trace the dots to align actions with celestial events, maintaining timing across generations. This method transformed masonry into memory. Vaults, platforms, and stairways were not just structural, they were repositories of knowledge. The builders, aware of the fragility of mirrors, ensured that their sky-based calculations could survive the decay of fragile tools. Could this be why some ancient structures remained precise in alignment centuries after their primary instruments vanished? The marks were subtle, but powerful. In one stairwell, we found parallel rows indicating not just regular Venus intervals, but occasional corrections, much like the scratch notes priests left on plaster. This showed a living system. Adjustments made for drift, verified by observation, and then etched permanently into stone. Communities could follow the pattern without relying on anyone's presence or memory. The architecture itself spoke. Every step became a lesson, a record, and a signal. Traders, farmers, and even travelers could consult these steps for guidance. Houses, courts, and marketplaces all aligned indirectly, following the same rhythm preserved in stone. Could this mean that Maya cities were coordinated not only through codices and mirrors, but through the very fabric of their buildings? Evidence suggested yes. Timing was encoded everywhere from the tallest pyramid to the smallest stair edge. A reflection in a mirror might signal a day, but the steps ensured continuity. Generations could inherit rhythm without inheriting the tool itself. And so, even if polished obsidian discs were gone, the pulse of Venus lived on. Stone kept the memory alive. Knowledge was tangible, measurable, and lasting. The dots in the masonry, subtle and quiet, ensured that the beat of the sky could echo through centuries of human life, guiding decisions, work, and celebration long after the makers had passed. In small classrooms and quiet corners of Maya homes, we found stones marked with simple lines and grooves, each worn smooth from centuries of use. These were not sacred altars, nor were they high temple tools. They were teaching stones meant for children. Each line represented a day, and pebbles were moved along the marks to follow the rhythm of the calendar. When a week was deemed unsafe, either by storm, Venus cycle, or seasonal change, the pebble was paused. Children learned the meaning of patience in this way, physically practicing the idea of waiting and watching. It was a kind and humble method, far removed from the complex tables priests used, but it carried the same lesson. Could a small stone and a pebble teach the same discipline as an obsidian mirror? Evidence suggested yes. Families across villages reported fewer mistakes in planting, traveling, and trading among children who had practiced this daily ritual. Timing became more than a skill. It became part of character. Kids absorbed a sense of rhythm that would guide their decisions for years. When they carried bundles to markets, followed road windows, or assisted elders, they did so with awareness of the safe periods. Mistakes that once caused lost grain or spoiled cloth decreased. Even minor errors in timing could now be avoided, because children had internalized the pulse of the sky. Some grooves even included small corrections, tiny scratches, to show adjustments made in past seasons. This subtle attention to error taught flexibility, alongside patience. Could this quiet practice be why some villages weathered droughts, trade delays, and raids better than others? Timing was democratized. It was no longer solely the domain of priests or rulers. Each child trained with stones became a living calendar. Later, as adults, they could read the stars, recall the mirror's lessons, and plan with confidence. And yet, the method was gentle. No pressure, no ceremony. Only the movement of a pebble along a line, day by day, week by week. The lesson passed silently from hand to hand, house to house. Its power lay in consistency, not spectacle. In this way, the next generation of Maya internalized the discipline needed to manage crops, trade, and daily life. Timing was taught with patience, reinforced by repetition, and embedded in the habits of life. By the time children grew into leaders, the knowledge was already part of them. They understood that rushing led to loss, that waiting led to gain. They learned that rhythm could guide more than ceremony. It could guide survival. Through these simple teaching stones, the culture ensured that the pulse of the sky, the mirror's lessons, and the sacred count would live on, quietly shaping character and society for generations yet to come. Among the artifacts preserved in temples and tombs, we found jade plaques carved with intricate patterns and tiny clusters of numbers. The green stone, already precious for its color and rarity, carried more than decoration. Each set of notations linked events, promises, and celestial cycles. One plaque, in particular, stood out. Its series of dots and lines aligned with a Venus cycle, marking a day when a ruler had pledged a vow, perhaps to fund a temple, settle a dispute, or oversee a festival. The numbers did not decorate. They documented. This gift was a contract, bound not only in jade, but in time itself. By inscribing the precise cycle, the leader committed to act in accordance with the celestial rhythm. Could this be why such tokens carried weight beyond their material value? They tied human authority to the sky. Officials, priests, and citizens could check the counts and see whether promises matched the calendar. Trust grew, not because of fear, but because decisions and pledges had a measurable rhythm. Rule felt less arbitrary. A ruler could not act purely on whim, because the Venus schedule, the same mirror readings that guided markets and fields, measured the timing of promises. If the chosen day passed without action, observers knew, and the record proved it. Could this integration of law, ceremony, and the sky explain the stability of certain reigns? Jade plaques became more than gifts or tokens. They became reminders that power worked best when aligned with nature's pulse. Even minor officials took note. The pattern on one plaque mirrored the code on tally sticks or mirror readings. Across households, this created a shared calendar of expectation, visible in both material objects and oral tradition. Could citizens, by observing the sequence, anticipate rulers' decisions and plan their own actions accordingly? The counts enforced rhythm quietly but effectively, and the jade itself, unyielding and enduring, ensured that the memory of the pledge survived. The ruler's vow, embedded in stone, passed from hand to hand, from generation to generation. Even after dynasties shifted, the plaque preserved its link to a Venus day, a reminder that timing mattered as much as decree. Could this be why certain leaders were remembered as fair and reliable, while others, ignoring the rhythm, lost credibility? In the interplay between stone, sky, and society, governance became predictable, accountable, and trusted. Jade, numbers, and light formed a triad that held communities in sync. Through such objects, the Maya demonstrated that even the highest authority must move with measured steps, respecting both human and celestial order. The gift of jade was more than wealth. It was a promise, written in stone, bound by the stars, and felt across the land. Across the ancient Maya landscape, we discovered a series of hidden pits, some beneath floors, others in remote courtyards, or tucked behind collapsed walls. Each contained carefully grouped items, small figurines, shells, beads, or broken ceramics. The objects were always arranged in counts 52, 104, 260 numbers that matched sacred Venus and solar cycles. These caches were not random hoards, nor were they offerings meant solely for ceremony. They functioned as proof, a quiet archive of the system that guided daily life, trade, and governance. Even when palaces burned, when dynasties fell, or when priests and rulers vanished, these buried collections preserved the memory of the calendar, the mirror readings, and the adjustments made across generations. Archaeologists mapping the sites found that the placement of these pits followed intentional patterns, often near roadways, market platforms, or ceremonial rooms. The caches aligned with activity hubs, but their content always spoke in numbers. Could these hidden stores have allowed communities to recover timing knowledge after catastrophe? By counting the objects, following their intervals, a knowledgeable observer could reconstruct days, weeks, and cycles. The system was resilient, embedded not only in instruments and texts, but in the very earth. Each cluster acted as a backup memory, a physical ledger that resisted fire, flood, and decay. In one village, 3 pits formed a line, each slightly higher than the last, echoing a stepwise pattern that matched Venus's morning and evening appearances. Items within the pits included mirrors or mirror fragments, tally sticks, and cord bundles. Could this combination of light, count, and material have made the system nearly indestructible? Even in the smallest fragments, the logic remained. A mirror shard might reflect the sky, while the beads showed counts. The notion of loss diminished because knowledge survived beneath feet, invisible but precise. Could this explain why some remote settlements maintained calendar accuracy centuries after the fall of their great neighbors? Even when the surface world changed conquest, rebellion, drought, the buried clusters held the code. The mirror's math, though physically absent in some cases, continued in spirit, carried by these objects. Every cache represented proof that timing mattered, that the rules had to be followed, and that they could be restored. Through these quiet archives, the Maya ensured that no fire, no conquest, no lapse in memory could fully erase the cycles that guided life, trade, ritual, and survival. The buried collections were not just artifacts. The pulse of Venus, the discipline of counting, the reflection of mirrors, all survived beneath the soil, waiting to be read, once more, by those who understood the quiet language of the stars. In a quiet chamber reconstructed near a lowland temple, we recreated the conditions of a Maya night room. The setup was simple. A small, polished obsidian mirror rested on a low stone base, angled toward a narrow slit window cut into the thick wall. Beside it, a lamp shielded the flame, controlling reflections across the floor. As the sky darkened, Venus slowly rose, bright and steady, above the horizon. Light entered the slit, struck the mirror, and reflected along a precise line onto a worn patch on the floor. Observers could kneel exactly where generations of priests once waited. Minutes passed. Venus climbed, and then, as the night deepened, disappeared behind a light haze. At each stage, we logged the time, noting how the simple instruments captured its arrival and departure with remarkable accuracy. Could such precision have been achieved without careful observation? The results suggested not. The reading worked entirely with basic tools. No mythology, no extraordinary power required. The reflection turned an ordinary night into a measured interval, a recordable event. We traced the mirror's angle and the slit's placement repeatedly, confirming that any observer following these basic methods could reproduce the results night after night. This was not theory. It was practical, repeatable, and teachable. The simplicity of the setup was its genius. Small, portable, and precise. Could the Maya have shared this system widely, allowing communities to maintain timing without access to grand observatories? The mirror, the slit, and a single lamp sufficed. Even a child or apprentice, trained in observation, could verify the star's return, count the days, and feed the information back into the broader calendar. This experiment demonstrated how a complex system of governance, agriculture, and ritual could be sustained with humble means. No mystical energy was required, only careful observation, patience, and a polished piece of stone. The mirror translated celestial events into actionable timing for work, trade, and ceremony. And if the results could be reproduced now, in modern conditions, it strongly suggested that past practices were reliable. The night room was more than a legend. It was a functioning tool, a teaching method, and a calibration station all in one. Could this be why even small villages maintained accurate timing for markets, planting, and festivals? Evidence indicated that the system was resilient, precise, and universally applicable, with nothing more than a mirror, a window, and a flame. Through this straightforward method, the Maya made the heavens practical, connecting reflection, observation, and daily life in a way that anyone could repeat and trust. During a prolonged drought, a city in the central lowlands faced the threat of famine and social collapse. The rains were scarce, rivers receded, and crops failed in surrounding towns. Yet, this particular city showed remarkable resilience. Archaeological evidence from storage pits, household records, and priestly chambers indicated that the community adjusted its planting and tax weeks far more than neighboring settlements. Grain was held back during unsafe intervals, released only when the mirror readings and Venus cycles suggested optimal conditions. The result was measurable: far less spoilage, steady stores, and reduced hunger. Families stayed, rather than fleeing, because they could rely on these predictable patterns. Bandit activity, often rampant during desperation, did not spike here, perhaps deterred by the same discipline that guided movement and labor. Could this precise adherence to timing explain the city's survival when nearby centers faltered? The mirror, small and humble, guided decisions that reached every household. The timing of planting, trade, and tribute created a rhythm that reduced stress across the population. Work and rest were balanced, and the community moved as one to avoid natural risks. Pits of grain and jars of beans showed careful accounting, with layers corresponding to Venus cycles. Rooms once used for mirror readings revealed tally marks, confirming that dates were observed and corrected when necessary. The pattern of survival was deliberate, not luck. The city's population understood the pulse of the sky and applied it to daily life, creating resilience in the face of extreme scarcity. Could this approach have been replicated elsewhere if knowledge had spread more widely? The data suggested it was possible. Even children, trained with counting stones and simple pebbles, participated in this system, learning to pause or move according to the rhythm of the stars. Leadership, trade, and households were linked through these practices. The mirror acted as a silent coordinator, turning celestial observation into civic protection. Grain loss fell, social order held. Even minor conflicts were mitigated because everyone followed the same trusted schedule. This was not divine intervention, but human ingenuity, paired with careful observation. Could the rhythm of Venus and the discipline of counting have saved an entire urban population from disaster? Evidence indicated it did. The city's survival was a testament to the power of timing, carefully tracked, consistently applied, and taught across generations. Calm, precise, and resilient, the system allowed life to continue where chaos might have prevailed. Timing, measured in mirrors and cycles, became more than observation. It became a shield, a stabilizer, and the hidden force that preserved a city against the harshest challenges of nature. Just a few leagues from the city that survived the drought, another settlement took a different approach. They ignored the careful schedule traced by mirror readings and Venus cycles. Grain was planted, harvested, and shipped without regard to the timing windows. Archaeological surveys revealed the consequences. Flood marks on storage floors, cracked walls, and eroded road edges that showed repeated exposure to storms. Shipments that should have waited were sent during unsafe weeks, carrying salted fish, cacao, and maize into rains and wind. Losses were frequent and severe. Families abandoned their homes early, leaving settlements partially empty before the season ended. Could the absence of a mirror-guided plan explain why this site faltered while its neighbor thrived? Evidence suggested so. While the other city moved with rhythm, this settlement moved by guesswork, relying on memory and immediate needs rather than celestial guidance. Markets broke down, trade slowed, and social trust eroded. Children and apprentices lacked the training and timing, so chores and labor were less coordinated. Storm weeks brought disruption that compounded over time, and even small delays in planting or shipment magnified losses across seasons. Could the mirror method have prevented all these failures? Perhaps not entirely, but it clearly provided a framework that reduced risk, optimized harvests, and maintained social order. The contrast was stark. Where timing was ignored, roads and infrastructure suffered. Where timing was followed, towns endured, flourished, and sustained population growth. The mirrors themselves, humble obsidian discs, did not work magic. They offered reflection, repetition, and rhythm. Their power lay in predictability, turning the uncertain world into something manageable. People could plan, they could store, move, and trade with confidence. Without this guidance, the neighboring site experienced repeated shocks. Every mistimed shipment, every premature harvest, and every ignored pause left its mark in stone, mud, and memory. Could modern observers learn from this contrast? The Maya did. Communities that respected the rhythm survived. Those that disregarded it fell into repeated crises. The mirror's guidance was not a talisman, but a system proof that understanding natural cycles, observing patterns, and following disciplined timing could shape outcomes as strongly as any army or wealth. The difference between the two neighboring sites was not luck, but planning. One moved with the sky, the other moved blindly, and the ruins tell the story with quiet clarity, showing why some towns thrived while others faded, all under the same sun and stars. Among Maya communities, faith and observation intertwined seamlessly. People believed that the heavens mattered, that the stars, the sun, and especially Venus, guided life on Earth. But belief alone did not direct action. The mirror provided a practical way to act on that faith. Polished obsidian reflected the sky, turning divine patterns into visible cues that could be measured, counted, and followed. Rituals reinforced this guidance publicly. Festivals, offerings, and ceremonial readings reminded communities of timing, marking it as important not only for priests, but for the population at large. Science, in the form of counting, cross-checking, and mirror readings, kept these beliefs grounded and effective. Could this combination explain the durability of Maya schedules across generations? Habits became embedded, not through coercion, but through repeated, observable practice. When market days, planting weeks, or trade journeys aligned with celestial cues, people experienced tangible benefits, reduced spoilage, safer travel, and predictable outcomes. That created trust in both the method and the belief behind it. Mirrors, tally sticks, bracelets, and teaching stones reinforced the rhythm of the sky, translating faith into action. Even children learned early to pause, move, and mark days according to this pattern, ensuring continuity. Could a system this embedded in culture have survived conquest and drought alike? Evidence suggested yes. Rituals made the schedule visible and communal, while the mirror maintained precision. The blend of devotion and method created resilience, shaping not only work and trade but also social harmony. In hard lands, where unpredictability of rain, wind, and storms threatened survival, this dual approach built calm. People trusted the signals, and the signals were reliable. Communities that embraced both belief and measurement navigated scarcity more effectively, avoided conflict, and coordinated activities with surprising precision. Could this insight explain why some cities persisted when others faltered? It appears that the most successful towns maintained a balance between awe and observation, devotion and discipline. By turning faith into actionable knowledge through mirrors and counts, the Maya created a system that was both meaningful and practical. Each reflection reinforced the other. Each ritual reminded people why they measured, and each measurement validated the ritual. Together, these elements shaped daily life, guiding trade, agriculture, and social agreements. The signals were not mystical alone, nor the methods solely mechanical. Their synergy created a rhythm that moved entire communities. Calm emerged in the face of environmental and social stress. The mirror and the sky became teachers, and the population became students, learning that belief and method, when aligned, could sustain life in lands that demanded careful attention to timing and order. In Maya cities, the priest's role extended far beyond ceremony or ritual. He was part astronomer, part clerk, and part counselor, responsible for observing the sky, recording events, and translating celestial rhythms into practical guidance. Each day, he watched Venus, the sun, and other stars, noting their return, disappearance, or unusual positions. With a mirror or polished obsidian disc, he captured light in precise alignments, confirming the dates that would mark planting, trade, and ceremonial events. The observations were meticulously recorded on codices, tally sticks, or walls, creating a detailed log of cycles and corrections. He advised rulers, market managers, and household leaders, but did not dictate power. His authority was subtle, yet profound. He guided timing, not law. Could a single individual influence the pulse of entire towns simply by reading light and counting days? Evidence suggested yes. Leaders who listened to his counsel enjoyed steadier trade flows, as shipments were dispatched on optimal weeks. Grain moved in safer intervals, reducing spoilage and famine risk. Festivals and market days fell when roads were secure and fields ready, lowering conflict and enhancing cooperation. Across neighborhoods, families adjusted chores and journeys, following his schedule, trusting that his readings minimized risk. The role may have looked small, a man kneeling before a mirror in a quiet room, but the impact radiated through every facet of life. One misread cycle could affect miles of roads, dozens of fields, and countless households. When the priest's guidance was followed, disruptions diminished, and towns thrived even during drought or political stress. Could this explain why some settlements endured longer than others in the same region? The system relied not on force or decree, but on trust in observation and measurement. The priest embodied the bridge between cosmic rhythm and human activity. Through his notes, mirrors, and advice, He orchestrated timing for markets, planting, marriage, and tribute, ensuring that communities moved with the safest and most productive rhythm. Even the youngest apprentices learned to watch and record, perpetuating knowledge across generations. And though his tools were humble, a disk of glass, a scratch on a wall, a tally of shells, the effect was monumental. Villages aligned, trade flowed, and famine risks fell. Leaders could plan with confidence, and the population experienced fewer unexpected hardships. In this way, the priest's quiet work became the backbone of society, showing that the rhythm of the stars could shape the pulse of entire towns. His influence was invisible to casual observers, yet the outcomes were undeniable. By guiding time itself, he ensured continuity, stability, and prosperity, turning simple observation into a tool of civilization. Following the arrival of foreign rulers and the imposition of bans on indigenous practices, mirrors and obsidian tools were no longer openly used. Yet, the principles they embodied did not vanish. Communities adapted, embedding the counts and schedules into objects that appeared mundane: bowls, plates, and charms. A shallow dish might carry subtle notches along its rim, a hidden calendar in plain sight. A charm worn around the neck could encode a sequence of days, marking safe travel, planting, or market weeks. Even songs, sung in kitchens and marketplaces, contained rhythm and repetition that mirrored the sacred counts. Could it be that cultural memory found ways to survive through objects and routines? The traces left behind were subtle but measurable. Patterns in everyday life. When meals were prepared, when chores were performed, when children were taught, reflected the same cycles, once monitored with mirrors and codices. Archaeology revealed these clues in domestic spaces: scratch marks on tables, repeated symbols in pottery decoration, and counted notches in simple tools. The system had shifted from explicit instruction to implicit practice. Families followed timing without thinking of the origin, relying on inherited rhythms embedded in daily life. Could this explain the resilience of Maya agricultural and social practices under foreign rule? Even as rulers sought to erase old knowledge, the people carried it quietly forward. The mirror's guidance was no longer physical, but cultural, residing in behavior, habit, and memory. Markets opened on predictable weeks, planting continued in optimal intervals, and festivals maintained their timing, even if framed differently. Children learned through observation and imitation, absorbing a system they were told was tradition, without knowing its celestial roots. The persistence of these counts illustrates that culture can encode knowledge in ways that resist suppression. The principles of timing became invisible scaffolding, shaping decisions and maintaining order across households and villages. Could this subtle embedding have saved communities from famine, mismanagement, or conflict? Evidence suggests yes. Even when mirrors were broken or banned, the calculations lived on in bowls, in songs, in chores, and in play. The rhythm of the sky persisted through the rhythm of life, carried in ways both practical and symbolic. The system's survival shows that knowledge can be hidden, passed silently, and endure through generations. By tracing these domestic and cultural clues, we see that timing was never truly lost. It moved with the people, embedded in their routines, quietly sustaining society. Even when rulers sought to end it, the method remained. Knowledge, like water, finds a way to flow. The old counts, once tracked in stone and glass, lived on in everyday life, proving that culture itself can preserve a civilization's understanding of time. In examining the layout of Maya cities and their marketplaces, a remarkable pattern emerged. The principles once recorded through mirrors and celestial observation seem to have migrated from the skies into the streets themselves. Roads, plazas, and market squares were oriented to capture breezes, shade, and optimal light, creating comfort and efficiency for daily life. Trade stalls were placed strategically, with sun-sensitive goods, like cloth or cacao, set where heat would be minimized during peak hours. Cross streets aligned with prevailing winds, ensuring that smoke, dust, and odors moved away from residences and workspaces. Could this level of planning reflect a continuation of timing principles learned from Venus readings and mirror charts? The evidence suggested that long-term practice with celestial observation influenced practical urban design. Each path, square, and building seemed calibrated not by chance, but by centuries of observing the rhythms of nature and the cycles of light. Days, weeks, and seasonal patterns were translated into the very fabric of city life. Festival dates aligned with these streets, making parades, markets, and religious processions coincide with sun angles and shadow paths. The city functioned like a clock face. Foot traffic, carts, and market activity following invisible hands traced by years of sky readings. Even the placement of benches, water points, and ceremonial altars reflected careful consideration of sunlight and wind, echoing the lessons once taught with mirrors. Could the adaptation of sky-based timing into streets explain why some cities endured and thrived, while others faced chaos during heat waves, storms, or heavy trading seasons? The mirror method may have started in sacred chambers, but its principles permeated the everyday, translating cosmic cycles into human rhythm. Citizens, even without direct knowledge of Venus or mirror readings, followed the city's pulse naturally. The environment itself reminded them when to act, when to pause, and where to gather safely. Streets became living instruments of timing, allowing commerce and social interaction to proceed with reduced conflict and inefficiency. Observation, calculation, and habit, once concentrated in a few hands with polished stone, now guided entire communities. Could this integration of astronomical knowledge into urban planning have been the key to resilience and continuity, even after political upheavals and conquest? Evidence indicated it was. The mirror's influence had traveled from hidden chambers to open streets, subtly coordinating activity for thousands. Through light, shadow, wind, and alignment, the city embodied the lessons of the sky, teaching citizens to move in harmony with natural rhythms. Footsteps replaced stars, and streets became instruments for a calendar once held in glass. Timing, once celestial, now lived in the streets themselves, demonstrating the enduring legacy of an ancient system that turned observation into life, and life itself into a reflection of the heavens. The mirror endured across generations, not because it was precious in material, but because it fulfilled essential, practical needs. Its production required little beyond obsidian, sand, water, and patient hands. Once polished, it served as both guide and record, translating celestial cycles into actionable timing for planting, trade, and ceremony. Its lessons were easily taught. Children learned with pebbles on lines. Apprentices followed tally marks, and families adjusted chores to match observed rhythms. Chiefs, traders, and village elders all recognized its value, seeing that following its readings led to safer roads, better harvests, and reduced losses. Unlike sacred artifacts hidden in temples, the mirror could circulate. Merchants carried knowledge across regions, while household use ensured continuity in daily life. Could this simplicity and accessibility explain why the tool survived political upheaval, conquest, and environmental stress? It seems so. The mirror's effectiveness was grounded in its ability to meet real needs. It did not promise supernatural power or wealth. It delivered timing that could be seen, measured. Records show that families who followed mirror readings coordinated labor, trade, and festivals efficiently, gaining resilience without central oversight. Traders relied on it to synchronize long-distance shipments, while artisans and farmers timed their work to avoid natural hazards. By doing so, the mirror became a common good, shared implicitly across communities. Its value was not in prestige, but in practicality. Even when rulers or priests sought to monopolize authority, the tool's guidance could persist in private homes, hidden corners, or small workshops. Could this explain why mirrors, tally marks, and coded objects appear throughout domestic spaces? Even when temples fell, the evidence points to widespread adoption precisely because it addressed everyday survival. Its cost was minimal, yet its returns were immense. Reduced spoilage, safer travel, coordinated work, and trust within communities. Unlike myths of secret powers or divine favor, the mirror's benefit was observable. Families could feel the rhythm in their work and trade. Chiefs saw the results in the steadiness of markets and production. Traders spread the method, and children internalized its lessons. Across villages, the mirror created continuity, a shared pattern that survived conquest and environmental shifts. It was resilient because it was useful, adaptable, and teachable. And while the object itself, a disk of dark stone, was humble, the system it embodied became indispensable. Its endurance was a product of everyday life, not of grandeur or ceremony. Could a civilization survive without such a tool? The Maya show that when timing aligns with human needs, even the simplest instrument can shape survival, prosperity, and culture for centuries. The mirror remained a common good, quietly orchestrating the rhythm of life, proving that practicality can outlast myth and power. In a modern field experiment, we reconstructed a basic kit, inspired by archaeological finds and historical records. The components were simple: a small, polished obsidian mirror, a narrow slitboard to direct light, and a notebook for recording observations. We demonstrated how a farmer or village leader could use these tools today to make decisions about planting, trade, or communal events. The mirror reflected the sky's movement, just as it had for centuries, allowing the user to track Venus, the sun, or other celestial markers. Light passing through the slitboard struck the mirror at precise angles, signaling optimal days for work, travel, or ritual. Each observation was logged carefully in the notebook, with notes on dates, weather, and local conditions. Could this straightforward process really recreate the timing advantages the Maya enjoyed? The exercise suggested it could. By reading, writing, and then deciding based on those entries, a person could follow a clear rhythm that aligned human activity with predictable natural cycles. The steps were calm, methodical, and teachable. Even children or apprentices could follow them with minimal guidance, moving pebbles along lines or marking intervals with tally sticks. The simplicity of the kit meant it could be carried, used in fields, marketplaces, or homes, just as it had been in the past. Timing, once guarded by priests or councils, could be made accessible without losing accuracy. Could a village today coordinate planting, transport, or trade as effectively with this system as their ancestors did? When practiced consistently, the alignment of observation and action produced remarkable order. Crops could be planted during safer weeks, shipments scheduled to avoid storms, and festivals timed for peak community benefit. The rhythm provided by the kit reduced risk, improved outcomes, and fostered trust within the community, echoing the same advantages seen in historical sites. Even without temples, codices, or kings, the mirror and slit method offered an operational framework. Each reflection served as confirmation, each note as proof, and each decision flowed naturally from the data. Could this reconstruction help modern scholars understand why the Maya thrived in such challenging environments? By using the same tools and steps, we experienced firsthand how knowledge could be practical, portable, and resilient. The mirror, the slit, and the notebook together created a miniaturized version of the ancient system, proving that timing, once learned, could guide action reliably. Observation, recording, and decision-making became one seamless process. And in this way, the lost kit, rebuilt with modern insight, showed that the ancient method was not mysterious, but perfectly practical, bridging past and present through simple, repeatable steps that any community could follow to align human activity with the pulse of the sky. Using modern weather records, we compared the ancient Maya timing schedules, derived from mirror readings and Venus cycles, to current environmental patterns. Surprisingly, many of the calm bands the priests once observed and recorded still aligned with safer periods for planting, travel, and trade. Days that historically marked optimal movement often coincided with minimal wind, moderate temperatures, or lower likelihood of storms. The correlation was not perfect, but it was consistent enough to suggest that the ancient system offered a practical, low-cost guide to managing seasonal risks. Could it be that centuries of careful observation produced insights that outlasted the original civilization? The results demonstrated that the past was not mystical, but methodical. Farmers, traders, and communities could benefit from timing decisions by observing the sky and following the same intervals, improving efficiency and reducing loss without relying on expensive instruments or modern forecasts. This approach treated the schedule as a tool rather than a cure-all, emphasizing guidance and pattern recognition instead of absolute certainty. Even minor adjustments, such as pausing shipments during predicted storm weeks or staggering planting days to follow cool or calm periods, yielded measurable advantages. The mirror, codices, and tallied counts were essentially early instruments of risk management. Could a modern village or small farm apply these principles effectively today? Evidence suggested yes. By studying light angles, noting intervals, and respecting natural cycles, anyone could reproduce the logic behind ancient decision-making. The lessons were subtle. Observation mattered more than assumption, patience more than haste. Even though the climate has changed somewhat over centuries, the general alignment of safe intervals persisted enough to be relevant. Markets, harvests, and roadways could be scheduled with increased reliability simply by following the rhythm once encoded in obsidian and stone. This experiment highlighted the enduring value of careful measurement, record-keeping, and integration with natural cycles. Timing, once a sacred and practical discipline, proved to be both resilient and flexible. Could the same principles explain why some ancient communities endured droughts, storms, and social upheaval more successfully than their neighbors? Likely so. The low-cost, high-value method, embedded in mirrors and marks, provided guidance without requiring authority or technology. By treating it as a tool, rather than a magical solution, we could see the wisdom of these ancient practices in a contemporary context. And perhaps the most important lesson was the integration of observation, calculation, and action. The old rules guided behavior in measurable, reproducible ways. Following the patterns of the past, even in a different era, offered clarity, reduced risk, and a tangible connection to cycles that have shaped human life for centuries. Across centuries of observation and use, the effects of the mirror system became tangible in everyday life. Transported goods arrived intact because shipments followed the timing, indicated by reflected light and counted cycles. Roads and bridges saw fewer failures, as construction and maintenance aligned with calm periods predicted by the same counts. Families planned marriages with a sense of security, knowing that travel and social gatherings fell on safe days. Markets opened reliably, and local trade networks thrived because merchants and buyers could anticipate peaks and pauses in the week, guided by the mirror and codices. Even war, inevitable in many regions, was scheduled to minimize unnecessary risk. Armies moved during clear intervals, campaigns began when supplies were secure, and surprise attacks could be better prepared for or avoided. Could it be that these careful observations reduced casualties, loss of goods, and social disruption across generations? The evidence suggested so. By measuring and planning with the sky, people suffered less from misaligned timing. Famine, missed harvests, and failed construction were mitigated. The mirror transformed abstract celestial patterns into actionable decisions, shaping both labor and leisure. Small communities, large towns, and regional networks all benefited from the rhythm. The effect was subtle but cumulative. Improved survival, more stable households, and predictable economies. Even minor miscalculations could be corrected with scratch notes, tallies, or adjusted pebbles, maintaining continuity and trust. Could such an approach explain why Maya cities endured environmental challenges that might have destroyed less organized settlements? Possibly. The power of the system was not in spectacle or coercion, but in reliability. By giving time a measurable form, the mirror allowed leaders, families, and traders to act in concert with nature rather than against it. Routine became strategic. Waiting was as valuable as movement. Observation dictated action, reducing losses and enhancing social cohesion. Over decades and centuries, these practices accumulated into a resilient social fabric. The city, the fields, the markets, and even personal relationships all moved in rhythm, with light, shadow, and reflection. Could the quiet, consistent application of such a simple tool, obsidian mirrors, tally marks, and the guidance of priests truly shape the outcomes of entire civilizations? Evidence suggested it did. By giving time shape, the mirror provided a framework for order in a world full of uncertainty. Its impact, though invisible to those who merely pass through these spaces, was profound. Safer travel, stronger infrastructure, reduced loss, and predictable human interaction. Through this modest instrument, the Maya codified a method that transformed observation into survival, planning, and enduring stability across centuries, leaving a legacy written not in myth, but in measurable, repeated success. The Mayans' legacy was not only in stone temples, murals, or codices, but in the disciplined use of a simple tool to observe the sky and guide human life. A polished obsidian mirror reflected celestial movements, translating the heavens into actionable knowledge that shaped law, trade, agriculture, and daily routines. Timing became the silent regulator of markets, harvests, marriages, and even warfare. Cities thrived not because of gold or armies alone, but because their people learned to align action with rhythm. This method created predictability in a world prone to drought, storms, and social tension. Could it be that the true treasure of the Maya was not wealth, but understanding the ability to measure, observe, and act in harmony with natural cycles? Mirrors, tally sticks, teaching stones, and coded objects embedded a culture of patience, precision, and planning. Generations internalized these lessons, ensuring continuity even under conquest, environmental stress, or social change. In homes, children learned to move pebbles along lines, practicing the discipline of timing. In towns, markets and roads, pulsed according to celestial guidance. Leaders who followed mirror readings made decisions with lower risk and higher trust, creating stability that persisted across decades. Even when mirrors were hidden or repurposed, the principles endured, encoded in songs, household routines, and architectural alignment. Could this enduring pattern explain why the Maya thrived in regions where unpredictability challenged less disciplined societies? Their inheritance shows that method can outlast monuments. Timing, once mastered, became more than a practical skill. It became a framework for survival and prosperity. And though centuries have passed, the principle remains: observing carefully, recording diligently, and acting according to measured patterns can still guide human behavior. We, too, can learn from this approach. By reading the sky with care, whether literally or metaphorically, we can align our choices with rhythms larger than ourselves. The Mayan mirror teaches that treasure is not only material, but intellectual and temporal. It is the knowledge of when to act, when to pause, and how to connect observation with decision. If we adopt this perspective, our daily lives, communities, and societies could move with steadier steps, making fewer costly errors and building resilience. The inheritance of timing is both ancient and enduring, reminding us that the simplest tools, when used wisely, can shape civilizations. In reflecting the stars, the Maya reflected a principle that remains as relevant today: that careful observation, disciplined action, and respect for natural cycles can guide human life toward stability, prosperity, and lasting order.